Hello, everyone. Welcome. Welcome to tonight's topic. And we are on the theme of establishing a building a rock solid team as part of our high performing leadership series. And one of the tools we're going to discuss tonight is establishing team norms. So having coached and consulted within organizations large and small for close to 20 years, I picked up a number of themes that really get in the way, things that get in the way of teams performing at their best. And so whether you have a team that is, if you're responsible for starting up a new team, or your current team's experiencing like petty conflicts that drive you bananas, okay? Those are things that I There we are, we're back. New technology. Hey there, hello, Alf. Where are you from, Maxima? Where are you from? Is that Scandinavian? Okay, so I'm going to talk, so whether you are kind of leading up a new team or whether you've inherited a team or you've been managing a team for a while, maybe there's these petty conflicts that happen. Maybe you're missing certain deadlines. Oh, Germany. Ah, awesome. Maybe your team's been missing deadlines due to miscommunications and is definitely the opportunity to, well, thanks for inviting people, Maximus. Appreciate it. So, I'm going to give you a foundational thing, a tool that I use in working with teams to help them reset. So if you ever wanted to have one of those reset buttons for a team you're having, that's really tough. I'm going to share with you some tips for that. All right, something that works pretty much every time, almost every time. And it's only one slice, right? And I'm giving away my different tips and tricks. And I'm going to share with you 5 key tips tonight. And I'm going to share with you some examples of some actual team norms. Like, what do you mean, Mike? What does that actually mean? I'm going to actually share with you some examples that I've developed with clients, or sanitize, removing any identifying information. But I'm going to share with you that so you have a sense of what that entails and how powerful it can be. So basically, what are norms? Before we get into the tips, what are norms? So norms are really, it's like a psychological contract that we form with each other. Right? These are like social and cultural patterns and practices of how we want to operate as a team. So they involve the expectations that we have of each other. That's what the psychological contract is. They're expectations we have of each other that impact the trust and performance of our team. Right? These are behaviors, these are habits, these are procedures that are acceptable to the team, right? That help form a cornerstone of what becomes the culture, the team's culture. And if you have a team that's dysfunctional and you have a lot of petty conflicts and backbiting and backstabbing and, all kinds of behavior that's unproductive, that is your culture, and you might need to shift it and reset it. And part of how you do that is around team norms. That's one of the foundational That's one of the cornerstones for doing that. And there's two types I'm going to talk about tonight: interpersonal norms, and operational, or what we call procedural norms. So the interpersonal norms are really around how do we want to behave towards each other. That could be like, we want to treat each other with respect. We want to treat each other with respect. So that would be an example. Operational norms are more procedural, tactical in nature. And that could be something, for example, hey, Mr. Compton, good to see you, buddy. Operational or procedural norms can be around, we're going to return calls to clients within 24 hours. Okay? We're going to return calls to all of our, we're going to return emails from clients within 24 hours. That's more of a procedural norm or expectation. Mr. Compton, you're asking, is HR my friend? I would say they are. I mean, I spent 20 years as part of HR. HR is there to protect the company from employees. Well, yeah, I understand all sides of the whole HR stuff. HR, a lot of people hate HR. They feel that HR isn't looking out for leaders, that they side with employees. Certainly, I've heard that and experienced some of that, but it's a lot more nuanced than that. That's a whole nother broadcast. I'm not going to go down that rabbit hole, but ideally, HR is balancing the needs of management and employees. Ideally. Oh, you don't have to apologize. You don't have to apologize. So, there's HR departments that are effective and those that are less effective, for sure. All right, so what are the 5 tips? So I'm going to share with you, I'm going to share with you the examples, and then I'm going to give you, what's the best way to do this? I'm going to give you the 5 tips first tonight, and then I'm going to share an example, or a couple of examples. So the first tip is to notice the signs when things are off kilter, right? So I mentioned those at the beginning of this broadcast. Are you do you have these ongoing conflicts that never seem to get resolved on the team? Do you have things where people are constantly complaining? Maybe people are always late to meetings or something, but it gets tolerated, but nobody likes it. So are there things that the team's tolerating that nobody likes? Okay. Again, that's another signal that you can leap into action here. There's incongruency between what the team members might want individually versus how people are behaving as a group. Right? So having an organizational psychology background, I'm fascinated about how people behave in groups, because oftentimes it's wildly different from how someone might behave individually, right? Just like the whole thing about mob behavior. You have sociological principles at play, social psychology, around responsibility and roles and things of that nature, which is going to be a future broadcast. But the thing is just to notice when you need help and seek out that help. If you don't have the skill set to do it yourself, and quite honestly, I believe it's best to have someone not part of your team facilitate these conversations. So whether you have someone within the organization from HR or an organizational effectiveness group, great, utilize them. If not, if you're a small business, then bring in someone, right? There's plenty of people like myself who support teams in this, will facilitate, that neutral outside objective. So wherever you are, wherever you live or wherever you're from, everything's virtual nowadays, so I guess it doesn't matter as much, but bring in someone outside, someone neutral, because that a key thing is to have trust and create safety, which is the second tip. So the first tip is notice when things are off center and leap into action. The second one is to create safety. You want a judgment-free zone. You want to acknowledge what's going on, the elephant in the room, like, hey, you know, I realize things just aren't working. Or if it's a brand new team, then establishing team norms is really critical too, because basically team norms make the invisible visible. So you're acknowledging what currently exists, what practices exist, what's tolerated. And even if people don't like it, you're making the invisible visible. And that's what a facilitator can help you do in a safe way. It's non-judgmental. They'll generally have some ground rules for the meeting. And then people are going to feel more at ease to contribute to the conversation. So they're really important. And that's like psychological safety, not physical safety, emotional safety, right? To be able to put yourself out there. Because we're going to get into some deep stuff as a team, right? Not on this broadcast, but in the team session. All right. So the fourth tip, ask for volunteers. So let's say, you know, I'm sorry, I missed a step. The third step is to brainstorm and describe supporting behaviors. Brainstorm some team norms and describe supporting behaviors. What does that actually look like day to day? Operationally, what does that, so if you're showing respect to each other, it might look different from your team to another person's team. So what's that look like for you? What does that actually look like? And have some real examples. And it may be, you know, for instance, when Joe saw that Mary was struggling and offered up to help her, when you know, whatever it is, when John had a very different opinion on something and told Neela that, you know, in a very kind and professional way without raising his voice, blah, 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 blah. You know, so you want to come up with, ideally with examples so that everyone on your team has a similar framework and mindset versus operating from their own. You want to have that common language. So identify that. And now I'm going to show you examples for that. So don't worry if you don't quite grasp it. The fourth is to ask for volunteers. So after you've had the conversation, don't expect to have everything fleshed out in one meeting. I would set aside about 2 hours minimum for your first conversation, depending on the size of your team, maybe 3 hours. So generally 2 to 3 hours is a good time frame. If you have a smaller team, you know, maybe you start off with a little bit less, hour and a half, but 2 hours is kind of a good start. Ask for volunteers after that meeting to then take what's been developed, the notes, whether you flip charted them. These days, you might be capturing them on screen because of we're doing everything virtually. But however you've captured them, for someone to type up the notes and organize them and flesh out the norms. And so you probably want to have, I would say, about 2 or 3 people. The 3 would be kind of a good number. You could have a little more, but probably not. I wouldn't have more than 4 people. And they can wordsmith stuff and bring it back to the team. The fifth recommendation I have is to set a date in the future so that your team can evaluate itself against those norms. So the idea is not just to create them, although there is a lot of healing and productiveness that can happen just by having the conversation, kind of the journey. But to keep it alive and to put it into action, to actually make them a reality, you need to check back with each other around it. So set a date, build that in, that you are going to, in 3 months, 3 months, your team's going to meet back up again and evaluate, how are we doing? This is what we said we wanted to do, how we want to treat each other. How are we doing? And I'm going to give you a very simplified version tonight in the example. I oftentimes will have teams literally rate themselves red, yellow, green for how well they think they're doing, how consistently they're in line with achieving that norm and living out that norm. So set that up for them. And again, this isn't something that should go in people's personnel files. It's not going to go be reported outside of the team. It's a tool for your team to use to recalibrate and keep yourselves accountable. And if you're using someone externally, then yeah, bring them in and back in 3 months to help facilitate that conversation. Okay, that's typically what I would do. So let me share with you some examples here. Give me a moment here. Share my screen. Okay, hopefully you can see this here. All right, so what I have up here is a sample team norms for just like a regular average team. All right, and this was a team that was in a lot of conflict for many years. They asked me to come in and help them. I worked with them for over a period of about 6 months, about a year. We worked on a lot of different things. And so here are some interpersonal norms. Now, for them, it's all interpersonal norms that we have classified. I'll share some procedural ones. But here's some examples. So we are flexible with each other and our schedules, okay? We're flexible with each other and our schedules. So one of the challenges that they had was some people started their day later, some would leave early, and then they made up all these stories, negative ones about the person's work ethic and their commitment to the team and things around respecting each other and coordinating stuff. So there are a lot of things. Hey, Jojo Stern, welcome. So there are a lot of things that, you know, were frustrating. There are a lot of things that were frustrating to the team. So that was something there. That was something there. All right. So how did they define it? For them, it was practicing tolerance and patience. Okay, you could even take that a step further in terms of behaviors. You're popping by? All right, well, thank you for dropping in. Thank you for dropping in. All right, so informing and notifying each other of their regarding schedules. That's another thing that they would do. Tolerance for variation in schedules, care and concern for others' well-being. So if someone didn't show up when everyone else did, to give them the benefit of the doubt and express concern for them, right? So that was part of how they defined it for their team. Your team might define it differently. So that's why it's important to have the supporting behaviors. They have another one. We hold high expectations for quality work. Again, some team members felt that others weren't pulling their weight and they were kind of fixing a lot of problems. It was creating a lot of errors. And so here they define it. All right. So I'm not going to go through all of these. I'm just going to scroll through. But these are some examples. You know, holding themselves accountable, being open to receiving constructive feedback. Okay, this was a team that was always defensive. The team members were always defensive, and they just couldn't improve because they put up the wall. That's not what they wanted, but that's how they were behaving. It just created this self-perpetuating cycle. So then they created some guidelines for that. Okay, they set aside individual priorities for the team priorities and so on and so forth. So that's one example. Let me give you, I'm going to give you one other example of a leadership team that I worked with. Okay? I'm going to give you one other example. Oops, that's not the right one. Give me a moment. I'm trying to figure out if there's a way to just switch between. Hold on a minute. Maybe it's already being shared. Oh, there we go. It was up the whole time. I just needed to minimize. Okay. So where did we go here? Oh, there it is. Okay. Ignore the man behind the curtain. All right, so here's a team I worked with. It was a leadership team, mostly of managers, well, actually directors. So it's a high-level leadership team, directors and VP or managers and directors. So for them, they had quality. They wanted to establish high expectations for quality work and holding staff to those high standards. So that started to go into performance reviews. That's how it became operationalized. They wanted a team that would share successes and failures. So this was a team that typically would tend to gravitate towards what's not working. What's not working, and they weren't acknowledging the successes, which became a downer. It really did. It became a downer for the team. Focusing on results. So this is something that just reaffirmed something they were already doing. They wanted to be more creative and hire for creativity. So this was a very technical and numbers-driven department, and they were having some problems. So they said, we need to hire some people that are more creative, right? Versus just a traditional, stay within the rules, all that type of thing. All right, supporting each other by sharing information. Right, that's something they already felt they were doing well. Now this was a pretty high-performing team, so it was different than the other team that was pretty much in a high conflict state for years. This team had some challenges, but overall they were a pretty high-performing team. They were just trying to go from good to great. Resolving conflict. So they put this as a norm: resolve conflict privately among themselves, not publicly. Well, one of the things they had to own up to was that, you know, at times they had called out team members publicly when it wasn't the most appropriate thing to do. It wasn't the most appropriate thing to do. I just realized I didn't have my comments view here. See if there's any comments. I don't see any comments tonight. Okay, so again, they wanted to acknowledge that and use better judgment. All right, they were spread across different locations. They wanted a sense of fairness, so they decided we want to rotate. Again, so we're getting into some procedural norms. Okay, respecting each other's downtime. So one of the things was that they weren't expected to be available 24/7, but many times people would text or call late in the night or on weekends. And they said, you know, we want to be able to respect each other's downtime, and we don't do that. So they worked out a system for doing that. Having leadership meetings every month, that was a challenge for them. So they wanted to institute that. So that's a more procedural type of norm. Okay, and so on. And you can read some of these others here. So that's just to kind of give you an example of what some team norms look like. And with this team, we revisited a couple times, several times year to year, and you could see the improvements. They did their self-rating in terms of, you know, when they're in the red zone, the yellow or green. Green was the ideal. That's kind of like, hey, we're consistently living up to these norms. You know, they become habit, that type of thing. So there you have it. This was kind of a long-winded broadcast, but hopefully it provided some nuggets of value. If you found it valuable, please share this with your LinkedIn connections, your Facebook friends, your Periscope followers, your YouTube subscribers. I don't even know. Can you share? Yeah, you can share on YouTube, I guess, to the other platforms. This is the first time I'm broadcasting to YouTube live. So I'm trying that out. So anyone on YouTube, if you're watching this, comment. I'll be checking that. So again, my name is Mike Gelman. And if you find, to be honest, if you find like you want to implement something like this, message me, connect with me on LinkedIn. I'm happy to help, or we can have just like a brief call or something about it. And if it's something you want to invest in, we can talk about that offline. But I'm happy to help you. I work with teams all the time, and virtually, and well, not now in person, but it can make a huge difference. So if you want to take a load off your plate and start enjoying your work more, think about these team norms. And if you're confident enough, give it a shot. If you feel you have enough trust on the team, feel free to give it a shot yourself. But I do recommend having a neutral facilitator, and that'll go a long way. And then you can fully participate as the leader as well in the discussions, and observe and whatnot. All right, so thank you all tonight for watching, or if you're watching the replay, thank you, and take care. I will be on again on Friday. Actually, this Friday, I will be starting some interviews, some high five interviews. So tune in on Friday, and I will be interviewing one of my team members. This will be a good way to do a trial run of the High Five Friday interview format, and you'll get to meet one of my secret weapons and a vital part of my High Five team. And so tune in on Friday at noon Pacific time. Take care. Bye-bye.